Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lavigne Show. Here we are, upgrading Canada is going to be the topic. We're going to get into the different systems that we have and different options that we have as well. But before we jump into our great guests, Bennett Hunter and Alan Aubut, and we're at Salt and Pepper Western and Asian Cuisine here in Breton, Alberta, which is my hometown. So this is our first time being live in Breton. So thank you very much to the Salt and Pepper Western Asian Cuisine for that one. Before we jump into everything, a couple announcements for today. Looks like Freeland is going to throw her hat into that Liberal leadership. So we're now basically looking at Freeland and Carney. And if you've been checking the notes and checking the websites, you know that we now have WEF candidate number 1 and WEF candidate number 2. So it looks like we're going to be getting a WEF candidate. Freeland is a director at the WEF on the finance side of things. And Mark Carney is a global banker, world banker. He was Canadian Bank of Canada, and he also did the Bank of UK. Plus, he is connected to the WEF on the UN envoy level, where he's working with the UN to bring forward a lot of global finance and programs. Very, very concerned because what are they up to? What are they up to? This is a globalist connected to people. We have basically nobody else running. There's people throwing their hats in, but if you look at the polls and you look at the media, it's definitely going to be Carney and Freeland. In fact, it was on the Jon Stewart show earlier this week. They're out there. They're pumping Carney. I've even seen a children's book promoting Carney. So I think that's the selected one. So get ready. And if it is Carney, folks, it's a reminder that we can have an unelected prime minister. In Canada, you're not elected to the position. You're brought forward by the leading party. So if the Liberal Party puts him forward, the Governor General absolutely can appoint him to the Prime Minister's office. Has this happened before in Canada? Yep. 1984, 17th Prime Minister of Canada. We had John Turner. Same situation. Trudeau decided to resign. There was a little bit left in a term. They brought in an unelected leader for the Liberal Party, and he became the Prime Minister, the 17th Prime Minister. He did lose the election to Mulroney after that, but in either case, he was unelected, and we can see the same thing happen today, or it's coming soon with Carney. And is this a concern to you? Well, you know how they play with the rules. They can move the election. In fact, under our Constitution, the election has to happen by September 2026. You didn't hear me wrong, 2026. So under our Constitution, that's when the election has to happen. And they like to play games. And that leads us into the next part of my little opening here. Max Bernier, he is now going to have to fight a little bit harder to become part of that leaders debate. There was an announcement from the Leaders Debate Committee. They did a rule change. So prior to this morning's announcement, or maybe it was late yesterday, but prior to the announcement, Max qualified for the Leaders Debate. It was 4% of the popular vote and 90% of the candidates run in the last election. And we met both of those thresholds as a party. But the rule changed. How did they change it? It's no longer 4% of the popular vote from the last election. It's 4% of the polls 28 days before the election. So now we're going to have to deal with polls and estimates and who's in charge and are they really going to be fair? If you look at the polls nowadays, a lot of it in the PPC will say, no, that's not fair. We got a lot more support than that. That's not even close to right. And why are we ignoring 840,000 votes at the last election, which gave Max and the party enough in order to get into the leadership debate? And why did they change the rules right after Carney and others are starting to announce themselves for the Liberal Party? It seems fishy. And if you check it out, there's one human being, one Canadian in all of Canada that this rule affects. It's the leader of the PPC. There's no other party that's in that position, no other leader that's in that position. So they quite literally made a rule change that only impacted Maxime Bernier and moved him from qualified for the leaders debate to now he needs to satisfy the polls in order to qualify. I think that's shady. I don't think that's correct. They shouldn't be doing stuff like that. And I'm quite annoyed with that. I'd like to see Maxime get into the leaders debate. And what this means is now we're going to have to double or triple the party because they're already shaving off points, and we're going to have to get to be so big that they can't ignore us. So on that note, what I want to get into now is look at the system we have. An unelected prime minister is possibly going to happen here in Canada. They're changing rules, eliminating opposition from debates, and this is our system. That's all legal. There's nothing illegal about that. You can challenge it in courts, but there's nothing really illegal about this. This is the Canadian system. That's a constitutional monarch. So what we're now looking at is what can we do to upgrade Canada? Are we going to be staying a constitutional monarch where the governor general, the king, and others have actual power in Canada? They can appoint the prime minister. In fact, that's the process. Or are we going to look at something different, like a republic, or maybe a more libertarian, populist? If you're following the PPC, that's a populist movement, much like Trump and other places across Europe. So what is the next version of Canada that looks like? What does it look like? Do we stay under the king? Maybe we get another prince in the future to become king? Or do we take the steps that Jamaica is doing, and they're moving to a republic? There was 54 countries in the Commonwealth at one stage. There's now 14. There's now going to be 13 because Jamaica is moving to a republic. Why are we still one of the 13? And our numbers for the support of the monarch are the lowest out of all of those 13 countries. It might be time to change the system, but what is that system going to look like? We're going to try and unify under one idea, one vision? Are we going to have a bunch of different provinces or states doing their own thing under a particular, like United States of Canada, like a republic? Or is it going to be fractured? Are we going to split apart and kind of like the Soviet Union did? Are we going to become a whole bunch of dispersed and fractured states? Some good questions there, and I have some great guests here that are going to help us go through that, especially on the libertarian and the populism side of things. So Bennett Hunter and Alan Aubut. Let's go ahead and bring them in. Bennett? Hey. And Alan's nodding his head. Did I get that right? Aubut.
Yes, you did. Perfect.
Fantastic. I was practicing, and he's very aware of that. I was practicing. Good to see both of you gentlemen there. Before we jump into both of your stories and who you are, what did you think about that news? Let's start with the Freeland and Carney potentially going to become the leaders of the Liberal Party, and we could end up with another unelected prime minister. We'll start with Bennett. What are your thoughts about that?
Wow, I'm shocked that the establishment, the status quo is going to continue on. Like, I almost fell out of my seat when I heard such a thing. Obviously, I'm kidding. That was to be expected. You're paying attention at all, that was basically to be expected. I'm not a betting man, but if I wanted to get into gambling, that would have been an easy bet to win for sure, right?
A lot of us have been looking at Carney for a while.
Yeah,
for sure. And Alan, what are your thoughts? Because the Liberal Party, they like to play games. I don't think they're going to give us an early election because Canadians want that. So I think they're going to try and do what they can to extend this as long as possible. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no question that what was the thought I had there? The fact that Trudeau, when he first got elected, said we're a post-national state, and this is proof of it. Oh, everything they do isn't for Canadians; it's for the World Economic Forum. And here we have the top two Canadian members of the forum wanting to be in charge, and of course, it's us and Canadians that allow this to happen because of how we vote or don't vote. No, that's the crazy thing. Like there was the recent by-election in that suburb of Vancouver, 16% turnout, 16%. That is terrible. So that's what the citizens of Vancouver think of our elections. Let's not vote. What's the national average? Last election was 64% came out to vote. 64%. That's insane.
I actually think you're absolutely right about that. The voter turnout, and you get what you don't vote for. So you're going to be stuck with whatever is coming if you're not going to get involved. 16%, that is terrible. And I'm curious if that's regional or if that's a sign of things to come. Are we going to have a record low turnout on this particular election? Bennett, your thoughts?
Well, here's the thing when you're talking about that stuff, and as a libertarian, I'm probably going to have a slightly different perspective than people that are kind of more into politics and government. I'm actually what you would consider a philosophical libertarian. So a libertarian, there's three core principles, basically, right? Self-ownership, property rights, and the non-aggression principle. And if you follow all those principles through to their logical conclusion, well, you end up with actually government's illegitimate. But for the sake of the fact that everyone still believes in Santa Claus as full-grown adults, and that's really what you're talking about here, folks. I won't get too deep into that, but because people do believe, I'm not really. I have kind of mixed feelings with people who don't vote, and in Canada, actually, we're even at the federal level, you're looking at best you can get close to 60%, and 40% of people that sit home. Now, part of me says you people should be actively involved because, it affects you and the people in your community as well. But at the same time, what is government at the end of the day? Government is force. So people that don't want to use force as a means to an end and are willing to accept force imposed on them, I can't really be mad at them unless they're actually benefiting from that. Then there's some selfishness in that regard. But at the end of the day, what we have to do, we have to put things into a realistic scenario. And just like with the states, just like with every other country, every state around the world, we're going to have this big selection process, right? That's going to happen. When it happens, I don't know, but it's going to take place. And the only chance, if we are to believe that there is such thing as democracy and our voice does matter, then the only thing that we can really do to push back against the status quo, the current rule and establishment, is we all have to come together. We have to join forces together because, as we know, we're not like the United States where you have two main parties. Matter of fact, I normally think that two parties is kind of a bad idea, but now that I see it and how everything unfolds in the U.S., it almost seems like, kind of maybe my intuition was maybe these things are not actually how I think. Actually, maybe picked one or two gives you a better chance, right? So basically what happened in the American situation is Trump, as an outsider, came and took over the helm of an established political party. And the reason why that really, really resonated with me was because I watched that same process play out, which got me actually to even understand what does it mean to be a free human being, was Ron Paul in the U.S. in 2008, 2012.
Right.
He did the same thing. So he started out in 88. He actually ran under the Libertarian Party. They have a Libertarian Party in the U.S. that would make our Libertarian Party look like a nothing burger. They have a lot of resources, a lot of finances to back them. But even Ron Paul, and he was a very astute guy, very articulate, big time libertarian. Even he couldn't make any grounds with an outside party. So what he ended up doing, and when he tried to run, probably 30 years later again, is he realized that, well, you got to start. Well, his main thing was if you start from within the system, you get access to the bully pulpit. And the bully pulpit means all media pundits have to be fawning over you and give you some attention and stuff. So, and of course, that's a little bit easier with the U.S. with having two main parties. In Canada, we have five at least, right? Five, I would say, parties that even can at least get some kind of political traction. Then there's some other, smaller ones. But even out of them is everyone's going to, they're like libertarians. I'm a libertarian and I associate and align with a lot of libertarians. A lot of libertarians will end up voting for the Libertarian Party, just like the PPC folks, people like yourself. A lot of people that's watching this show is they're going to align with the PPC for sure. And I definitely align with a lot of the PPC policies. Once again, I was a founding member of the PPC and I'm a big fan of some of the policies. And so you'll have that cohort of people that, and we've seen this. This isn't speculation. We've had two elections where this has played out. So you've seen the people that have voted along their party loyalty in terms of PPC. And I'm not saying anything against these folks, but then once again, you got the libertarians doing their thing, and you got the independents that choose to either vote for one of the parties, plug their nose kind of thing. Really, the only hope with the way I see it these days is the people who are politically active. I don't think we have enough to actually make anything actually happen, unless now here's the exception. Here's the one area where a party like the PPC, where we could, if we were going to use, let's say we were going to use the PPC to be the party that we were all going to unify under. The only way that could possibly even happen, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm glad to hear your folks push back on this, is if that silent majority, that 60% or 40%, which would represent in Canada at least 10 million people. And since we know the way the first past the post systems, you could get between 5 and 6 million votes in this country and still form government. So if you have 10 million people who don't vote, and you could entice that 10 million Canadians to come out and vote, then yes, then you could have a smaller fringe party like the PPC or even the Libertarian Party or any that could truly challenge the status quo and the establishment. That is a certainty. The problem is, though, is what are the chances that happen? And that's kind of what I'm here to talk about with you folks. What are your guys' thoughts in terms of that whole concept of how are we going to rally everyone together? That's kind of, I'm just throwing it out. If we were going to join with the PBC, do you think there's at least, another 6 million Canadians that are going to kind of do the same thing? And do we have a chance of making that a reality?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, and we're going to get to that in just a second because we'll go to Alan. Because the leaders debate for Max is one of the ways to go ahead and get this information out there, but they've shut us down on there. We're going to have to work twice as hard to go ahead and get in there to get the message out to Canadians. So what Bennett is talking about is like, how do we go ahead and get one of these movements? But when you have media blocking you, they ignore us completely. All parties attack us or completely ignore us. Nobody talks about Max except for ourselves. How do we address that kind of thing? How do we get momentum when we're not just fighting against voters or getting awareness out to voters? The system is against us. They're changing the rules last minute on the debates, and they're doing tricks like that. So how do we kind of fight against that?
That's something I've been struggling with for the last 3 years. That's one reason why I started writing for the Purple Wave. So if anybody's interested, the articles, we put out an article every week, every Friday. So it's thepurplewave.substack.com. And this is one of the topics that comes up quite often. How do we do it? And I have no answers. I've posed the question. I thought we had a solution. And a good friend of mine who's also one of our writers, Leo Oya, he came up with some good examples to illustrate how we can do it. And he was a high school teacher, he's a retired high school teacher. And there's a couple of one specific anecdote that really sits with me and that really shows you what's holding us back. And what it is, it's ourselves. So what he had in his class is he had a fine for anybody who was late, that depending on how late they were, they would have to do push-ups. And he had a very simple calculation. And there's this one female student came in late, and he signed to her, I think it was 12 push-ups. And she jumped up. I can't do 12 push-ups. She's, as it was, she was a member of the basketball team. She's an athlete. Can't do 12 push-ups. Well, doesn't matter. You got to do it. So she got down, did 6, jumped up. Say, I can't do 12. Well, you're halfway there. Try again. So she went and did 6 more and jumped up. See, I can't do 12 push-ups. And there was a pregnant pause in the class, and then Leo didn't say anything, and then one of the other students said, well, you just did 12. So Leo then used it as a teaching moment and say, well, you just haven't got to the stage here where lactic acid buildup in the muscles actually forces you to stop. So why don't we just try and see how far you can actually go? Oh, all right. So she got down and slowly she started doing push-ups, and she ended up, I think it was 32. And that was the lesson, is that it's up here. That's what holds us back. It's ourselves not believing in ourselves. We hold ourselves back. Or a lot of us do. Like the three of us don't. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But the vast majority of Canadians just don't believe it. And that's one of the things I've seen locally here with our local electoral district association. We've lost a number of key members, especially in the last year. And they started believing this nonsense of these polls, for example. And that's something, my career was into geostatistics. So I'm not a real expert on statistics, but I know the good basics of it. And it's insane, absolutely insane, that these polls, and you can get a good cross-section of them by going to Canada 338. So they agglomerate all of the various polls, and then the key number to look at is how many people did they sample. And the average is 1,500. There's 338 ridings. Now, if you're going to represent the true spectrum of Canada, you should sample all the ridings. Well, if you did that, that means you sampled 5 people per riding. That's crazy. You can't get a good sample on that. And that's the thing about, back to what you started off at the start there, Jason, is that the last election, the Canadians, that was a good poll because it was a huge sample and that was accurate. And why that election, debate commission, they shouldn't even exist. Is the friggin' Liberals started them up? What was it? 2018. It was Trudeau, just like his independent senators, independent my ass. And so they just like cooking the books because they looked any way to convince Canadians, because that's all polls are. It's just they know what they want to get. They're not asking for your opinion. They're driving the result.
There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Simple.
Yeah, well, yeah. But it's the thing
no, but
is,
come on, anyone that went to school, I mean, come on, let's just be honest here, folks. And if you have any background in statistics or anything, I mean, even in grade school, we all learned about mode, medium, and mean, and an average. Come on, you can make that whatever you want, depending on which you select. You want the mode, you want the mean, you want.
No, it's all on the sample size.
No. I know what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying there, but I'm just saying, in terms of statistics or polls. I mean, in terms of polls, it's first of all, it's the questions you're asked, it's how you word it. Main thing there is who the hell are you sampling? Not just how many people are you. Yeah, and not exactly who are you sampling. And I'll tell you right now, as a 54-year-old man that's lived in this country my whole life, never answered a poll ever. So when they say that they're getting the feels of the Canadian population, and I'll tell you, it's not just me. I mean, we probably all know plenty of people in our own lives that have never taken a poll. So it's obviously the people that they poll are typically, I would imagine, that are people are big time, political types, right? Yeah. And have a cozy relationship with the pollsters. And it's just, they're on speed dial for the most part. I mean, there's more than just a certain amount, but they know exactly, just like when the media brings someone on and they have a panelist with 3 or 4 people, they based on who they bring on, what kind of narrative is going to be presented. Which is why you'll never see CBC or CTV bring on Jason or me to talk about any subject matter, because you can't control that particular Overton window, right? There's going to be some discourse that nobody that in that audience has ever heard before, right? So
that's one thing that let's step back a little bit. They were talking about requiring people to vote like they do in Australia. That at least that kind of vote is a good sampling. And I agree with you, Bennett, is that...
No, but the minute you tell me you're going to force me to vote, whoever you tell me to vote for, I'm not voting for.
You've got the freedom...
I was waiting for that, Bennett.
Freedom of choice, and the freedom of choice includes not voting.
Right.
So, that's the thing is, I've done these surveys on where are you in the political spectrum, and I always come up libertarian. So I understand exactly what you're saying. But there again, we need to have a proper vote, and the one thing that's never on the ballot is none of the above.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, you know what? Tell you the truth, Alan. I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because way early on, and it was when I just had Facebook. I didn't have anything else, or X, or Twitter back then. Didn't have a YouTube channel. But I actually started a little thing, and I even made the little ballot thing with the bottom. You had the Conservatives, the Liberal, the NDP, and I had written down there, NOTA, none of the above. I tried starting this little initiative. I put it on the Facebook page. I tried to get Canadians to died on contact, basically. I mean, I had a little tiny bit of traction, but I'm all for the none of the above. But the problem with is, and I get it. We're all frustrated, but the problem with this kind of stopgap measure or this kind of quick fix, it never actually works. That's the thing. Like, that's literally what politicians do, right? They think in these abstracts and ways of thinking that you can. But as we're seeing, humans, we have free will, unless you believe in determinism, and it's not as easy to. Now, we do know that there's probably about, what do they say, roughly 70-80% of the population that can be cajoled to do a lot. But there's 20% at least, and I definitely count myself among them, that no matter what these people do, there's nothing anybody can do that's going to force me. And the minute force is brought to the table, is I got a problem with it. So this is what I mean. And this is not just me as a libertarian. There's a lot of Canadians who don't even know that they're libertarians, but they are, right? Yeah. They just don't. They've never
free will. If you desire to express your own opinions, your own thoughts, then that's free will. And you're right. And that's where you and I think Jason, we're truly aligned. And And that's one reason I threw in with the People's Party. It's the only party that comes even close to my own personal morals, ethics, and beliefs.
Yeah. Well, you know, actually, Alan, let me just say one thing about the PPC, because I want, especially for the people that are watching this, which would be a lot of the PPC folks, because I want to do a little clarifying right here. I got a little pissed off at the party, Maxime, and there's a couple guys. I won't drop all the names, but there's a couple party insiders that, I'm not a fan of it all. But I will just say this. The PPC startup, it was something that I was interested early on, but once I met and interviewed like dozens of candidates and members and supporters, I got to tell you, I know for a fact, so nobody's got to convince me that there's a lot of really great Canadians out there, and they're lost. I see them. They're massively demoralized. They've been placed in this box where they're basically told that you're meaningless, you're nothing. It's a terrible thing what these hacks in the media and the ruling establishment have been doing by playing up this, not just division, but whipping up this envy and resentment towards each other. But I've seen these people out there, and I firmly feel for these people, and I understand that everybody is pissed off. Everyone's just finding a way to get out from underneath the Trudeau Liberals, and I'm right there with you. But my biggest fear is all of those great people, those PPC supporters, people like yourself, people like myself, is we're going to keep on getting massively disappointed. And we're not going to even be anywhere near close to emulating the success of our American counterparts if we're not willing to put our egos. And I tell you, I'll admit, listen, I've got a bit of an ego myself. I'm willing to put it aside for the sake. Hey, you got to. And I know that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because that's the one thing I found about my fellow Canadians. And it makes me uncomfortable that there's so many Canadians which is why I kind of like America in some ways, is, Canadians are kind of, that tall poppy thing. And it kind of bothers me. Why do you have something against people that have some self-confidence? Like, what the fuck is up with that? Because I'll tell you, you can't be very successful at anything if you don't have any self-confidence, right? And no wonder fucking Canadians are kept down on their, on their ass for the most of their lives, is because every time you try to pop your head up, somebody's right there trying to beat it the fuck down. Americans have a completely different psychology and mentality when that comes. But like I say, my biggest thing, once again, back to this thing is, I, just like you folks, I just want to see something actually come to fruition where we as Canadians, I was so proud of the truckers. I did my own thing. I didn't go to Ottawa, but we had one here in Fredericton and then the Lincoln Big Stop truck stop. And there was huge gatherings there. And I'm talking in New Brunswick where we're talking Fredericton. This is fucking government central down here. And I was impressed all the heck at how many people actually showed up to protest in like Lincoln, New Brunswick, and Fredericton of all places. So it told me, and then I seen, of course, all the videos of the Canadians. So I know the support is there. The problem is there's just so many people that are pointing in so many different directions. The people that we want, the people that we have, the silent majority, or the PPC people, or the libertarians, or the independents, or the demoralized and disenfranchised. There's enough of us out here that we can be a real force for change. 100%, I know that with certainty. The problem is, we're all separated, divided. So here's something I just want to put out there. And if you don't mind there, Jason, is look at what and I know this is going to probably initially piss off some PPC folks, but let me just throw this out there. And once again, it's just spitballing, just speculating here. What if instead of we all and I'm even saying this, and my libertarian peeps will be
just
watching
spit it out.
Is why don't we do, or at least try to do something in terms of, let's all take over. First of all, Maxime, he was in the Conservative Party. I see now that stepping out and starting another party seemed like a good idea early on. But I think now that you have a little bit of hindsight, I think actually if Maxime was actually back in, could get his seat again. If you had some other people take over, like I say, that's where the power is, right? That's where we recognize the establishment, these parties that we all loathe. I'm not a fan of them in any way, but that's where the power lies. And if you are looking to take over the helm of power and use it for good in any way, that's where it is. And once again, I've watched 2 elections go by now where I've seen my fellow Canadians and fellow PPCers and fellow libertarians constantly disappointed and demoralized and just chomping at the bit for the next time, only to see them get disappointed and demoralized even further. We've got to stop doing this, folks. And it can't be about just, blind loyalty to any party. It's got to be, what can we actually do in reality, in this tangible world we live in, to actually change things for the good for all of us, and even the people that'll fight us tooth and nail, they will benefit as well. So anyway, sorry, I know I went a bit of a tirade, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Well, let me just jump in there quick, Alan. Alan, before you jump in there, let me go ahead and jump in as well. Yeah, okay. So there's a whole bunch of things I want to touch on there that's really, really good. I do like to kind of remind you that the PPC party is changing. So the PPC party that was yesterday, today, and tomorrow is going to be very different parties. There's a lot of things that we have to move forward on when it comes to candidates and supporters. And I think you identified some of those issues. Maybe when you've interviewed a whole bunch of candidates, we have another selection process. We're getting a little bit better at finding great candidates. We have good ones, and we're improving on that level as well. And when it comes to the max issue, a lot of people are wondering whether or not we have foundation documents, whether or not he's going to be running forever. Does he own the whole thing? And they seem to be focused on that. But what I do not hear a lot about, and Alan, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is people coming after the policies or our platform and our principles. That doesn't seem to be the talking points. The talking points are whether or not we have a seat, whether or not we can get a seat, how many times Max lost. And those are the tropes, but they never bring up the policies or the platform. And I think that's because they actually align with it. They agree with it. They just want to address things in a different way. And one more thing I'm going to say before I pass it on to Alan is there's this desire to kind of make a second party that's very similar to the Conservatives, like carbon copy. I think that's a mistake. What needs to be happening is very similar to what the Reform Party showed us in the late 80s, early 90s, is you have to provide another option, another strong, sound, reasonable option. And the West really lit that flame in the 80s because we weren't getting conservative values and conservative leadership. It was a progressive conservative party. Progressive, it's in the name. So we weren't very pleased with that. Like, it was a shock to me kind of grow up learning that. And what I think ended up happening is Reform did a great job on replacing on the West conservatism and conservative leadership. Where we messed up is when we became the Alliance and then worked with the progressive Conservatives and merged with them. I would have preferred that power died there. The old people that were there, the old Conservatives, the enrooted ones, the ones that have been there forever. It would have been great if they just retired and you continued with the Alliance and you continued to work out east. But that didn't happen. And then now what you saw is another power was created. 2005, Conservative Party of Canada, we had Harper, grew it from there. Now, you talk about the CPCs like they're an entrenched system, but they're young. They're really young. They're 20 years old, if you look at it that way, because that's what the result of the merger was a CPC. And I don't think Canadians remember what it took to actually get there, to bring conservatism back to the table. And over time, we certainly moved to the left. You can see this with Pierre and his policies. O'Toole was very, very difficult for the conservative movement. And I think what we need to see now is more moving of that Overton window to the right. And I think it's happening whether the PPC gain ground or not. I think Canadians are waking up to the radical left ideology. They've had it. They went way too far. They're talking about children, chopping them up, filling them up with things, removing the choice. A lot of people are fed up with that. And I think the biggest block that we need to address and attract, and Alan will again, I'll send it to him in a second, he can correct me if I'm wrong, are the non-voters, the disenfranchised, the political homeless is a term that we're hearing a lot now. People that wanted to be, aligned with liberals, and they definitely don't want to go to conservative, but they find themselves homeless now. There's a lot of people headed towards the PPC right now because of that kind of environment. And I think it's the right place to be. Be right of the Conservatives when the entire country is starting to shift right is a good place to be. And I think we have two elections to either put up or shut up. If the PPC party can't build to the point where we get a seat in this next election and then continue to build on that to actually become potentially the balance of power or official opposition, then maybe we've done a lot of things wrong, or Canada isn't the place for a populist movement. So I'll throw it to Alan for that because there was a lot there to digest. Because Bennett is a great voice there. But I'll throw it to Alan for a bit, and then we'll see where we're at. Alan?
Okay, so over the years, I just kind of sit back and observe, let things come in, wash over me. And what I've noticed over the years is that each of these parties, things have happened, but it's at the head office. Like, for example, the Green Party came about, one issue party, and it's a fraud. It was always a fraud. It's still a fraud. It always will be a fraud. And just a quick example of that, we hear a lot about You're both familiar with the term oxymoron.
Oh yeah,
Two
that's what
Yeah.
that's what a progressive conservative is.
Yeah, well, no, okay. So the oxymoron I want to show you here is greenhouse gas. We've all seen a greenhouse. A greenhouse is a shelter that protects the loss of heat through convection. So radiation comes in, heats up the contents of the greenhouse, but it doesn't lose that heat through moving air, which is convection. That's a greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
A gas is physically incapable of stopping loss of heat through convection. So there is no such thing as a greenhouse gas, period. So throw that out the window. So the reason I bring this up is that, so the Green Party came out, this is what they're going on. Oh, humans are the scourge of the earth. And another just quick sideline here. Oh, there's too many people. The last time I checked, 8.4 billion people. If every person was assigned 1 square meter, so every man, woman, and child in this earth, 1 square meter. Well, there's 1 million square meters in a square kilometer. So that's 8,400 square kilometers, which is just under the land area of the island of Puerto Rico. Every man, woman, and child could be on the island of Puerto Rico. That's how many people there are in this planet. We're minuscule in the scope of things. So we got these two things. So that's showing the Green Party and everything it stands for is a fraud from start to finish. So why I bring this up is the Liberals have taken on all of the green policies. The Conservatives have taken up all the green policies. The NDP have taken up all the green policies. Why is that? It's not the individual candidates that got elected. It's the head office, the unelected people, the Canadian equivalent of the American swamp. They're the ones that drive the parties. And that's one reason why in the 21 election, I kept using the phrase that the opposition was Tweedledee, Tweedledummer, and O'Fool, because they all had the same policies. They're all going on the green policies, everything that's, I just makes me sad what's going on with it.
Well, can I just respond to that the green policy stuff actually real quick there, if you don't mind?
Real quick.
All right. So with that whole green policy, actually, no, you go ahead. Actually, I'll wait till you're done. Okay. Actually, sorry, because I don't want to.
All right. So with that, so that's where I noticed that these parties had changed that anybody that was elected, and if they wanted to represent their constituents, and if the head office, the little core group that are unelected, like that's the prime minister's office or those in the party headquarters, if they didn't like that, out the door. Like, for example, in Thunder Bay, Superior North, we had an NDP representative, Bruce Heyer. And his constituents here, a lot of people are gun owners. And nobody here, really, or very few, supported that gun registry. And then Harper's government, they wanted to finally get rid of the gun registry. And he voted in favor for it, of getting rid of the gun registry. And what did the NDP do? They turfed him out. All because he was representing his constituents. And he's not the only one. Because the Conservatives have done it, the Liberals have done it. Was it Derek Sloan, I believe, was thrown out of the Conservative Party because he didn't toe the line. No, they expect the members of Parliament to be avatars for whoever is behind the back doors. And that's the thing, that there's two ways of changing things. You either get in the party and change it from the inside, and I can tell you right now, it's impossible. Or you do like what Maxime did and start a new party and start from scratch, where for now, the head office are people who aren't compromised. So that's one reason I was what appealed to me about the People's Party is that it's a fresh face. It doesn't have the baggage. Like the fact that it drives me crazy watching what happened there over the UK, that it's the members of parliament decide who the leader's going to be. It's the elected members vote for who amongst themselves. The caucus decides who their leader's going to be. That's one reason why in the Conservative Party, what's that? They had 4 different leaders in 8 years or 5. I've lost track. And all because of that. You can't do that in Canada. And all the parties are the same, other than the fact that the Conservatives managed to get in just before they got turfed out. The change into the Elections Act, where right after election, the caucus decides whether or not they will follow that modification to the act. And if they have 25% or more of the caucus decides there's a leadership review, there will be one. And that's how we lost O'Toole, because of that. Well, that same election, the Conservatives voted for that. The caucus did. The Liberal caucus did not. And now they're stuck. They'd like to get rid of them, but they can't, because all the power is in the hands of the Prime Minister's office, and Trudeau is just the puppet, and Telford and the gang behind her, they're the puppeteers. And we have no control over them. So there's my little rant.
Okay, well, that was a good rant, but actually, can I just respond to that there, Jason? Especially because I don't want to lose my train of thought on the green or the greens or whatever. It's not even just the greens. Let me just give you a little run, because like I said, I pay attention, especially to the economic side of things. That's kind of my wheelhouse stuff. So really what this is, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but our economic system, no economic system had really lasts much more than 200 years. And we're kind of nearing the end of this. And even if you go back to, what was it, Hoover or whatever it was down in the States with the Green New Deal, all that is, and if you understand Keynesian economics after World War II, John Maynard Keynes, what we're doing here, because of the way our economies work and the centrally planned, and you have central banks, is now when they tried, when everyone was pissed off, whether you're talking about after World War II or at any point in time when they had to whip up, a lot of work type programs to get us pissed off and disgruntled, peons to stop, railing against the ruling class and just get back to work. Well, what they do is they just come up with these schemes. So back then it was the New Deal. But the problem, see, these people, they learn every time they try these experiments, they learn something new from each one. Well, the problem is once you give all these working class people well-paying jobs and they become very productive, and you're building a whole lot of things, which increases even more productivity, unleashes even more productivity in the economy, bridges, dams, roads, all that stuff, all this infrastructure. Well, now we peons, we have money to spend. What happens when you have money to spend? Well, that's where inflation creeps up. And if there's one thing central bankers and big governments hate, especially in this modern world, is not being able to control inflation. They like 2% so that you get some positive growth in inflation, which is a 2% taken away from us. It's a depreciation of our purchasing power, 2%, if it's at 2%. But what they're trying to do now, and it's not like, I get it, Katie Telford and the PMOs, but no, what it is there's a lot of people around the world, a lot of actually jurisdictions around the world, places like China, who have been buying up treasuries, in particular US, but they buy some Canadians as well. But what this is all about is satisfying the bondholders, the big money, handlers and transfer pipe people. That's what a lot of this in terms of economic stuff. And that's why it's not just happening in Canada or the US. It's happening on the global scale, because the US is the world's reserve currency, and every central bank since the financial crisis have been in unison, although sometimes they might go within a couple months of each other, so it doesn't look so goddamn coordinated, but they just keep devaluing, but not one too much so that one gets an advantage. Although America will always have the advantage because they're the reserve currency. But the reason why you're seeing this happening around the whole Western world is because these people are looking to something that's going to have to, like I say, eventually our economic system is not going to be able to sustain itself for much longer. That's what it is. Now, it could possibly be this a new deal, whatever they come up with, but this new deal, from what I'm gathering, is going to come with a whole lot of caveats, a whole lot of surveillance, and a whole lot more control than any human being in the past has ever even perceived of or dreamt of. Now, the other option is, is get on this populist train, which it seems to be whereas we use cash now to get out and hide everything. Well, it'll be Bitcoin. So the populists are trying to, everyone knows, no matter which side of this divide you're talking about, everybody knows that something has to change in terms of the economics and the current system and the structure that we're dealing with right now. The problem is there's two sides right now that are battling for that control. Now, one side, bare minimally, I think is much more beneficial to the average worker, the typical person. Although make no mistake, no matter who gains control and power, we're still going to be peons, serfs, and slaves to some kind of ruling class. It's just that some ruling classes are wise enough to treat you better because they realize that you're much more productive, right? This is the big thing. The left, the liberals, the globalists, they look at us as basically just like pawns, and they're not thinking down at that micro level, at the individual level. Whereas at least, like I say, the populists, the Trump types, they have their own kind of game plan, but they at least are wise enough to take us into account and realize how to manipulate us in a manner that's actually going to make us happier and more productive, right? That's really what it comes down to. But anyway, that's all I want to say in terms of this whole thing, in terms of the Greens and all these parties, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. They are scared to death of losing control, especially on the monetary system and the economic system, because that, if you want to know what actually brings the pitchforks out, that's what does it.
Fair enough. And also what upsets people is when they believe they're living in a democracy and they're not. $350,000 is the buy-in. And for $350,000, you too can become Prime Minister of Canada. All you got to do is win a vote with the Liberal Party. And we know how they work. You make some promises and you can get that done. And hey, look, you don't even need a seat. And you can be. So I'm not sure why we're not trying to raise money for jug meat to maybe run for the Liberal Party, because anybody with a chunk of change can do it. Now, Alan, do you think Canadians are going to enjoy learning that you can buy your way to the Prime Minister's office, you don't have to be elected, and you'll have control of our purse strings? And if you're a global banker like Carney, you know which strings to pull in order to cause a little bit of pain and suffering here in Canada, in order to maybe buy an election a couple months down the road. Do you think Canada is going to stand for that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're wusses. There's no question. Like all the people around around me in this little town I live in, where they're oblivious to what's going on. It's just as long as they're happy in our little acreage here, now we're happy. Oh, geez. The price of beer just went up some more. Sigh. No, the price of gas just went up. Sigh.
Yeah.
Oh, we just take it. Like it's crazy, the fact that the average person, like I know Bennett, you're not a real fan about statistics, but it's bring that back in. So the average person in Canada pays was it the last number I saw from the Fraser Institute was 46% of their income goes to taxes. 46%. That's the average. So the average is, if it's probably a normal distribution. So the mean and the mode are the same. So that's the peak. The average is right in the middle. So half the people in Canada pay more. And it's not the rich people.
Right.
It's not the rich people.
Yeah, well, no, I'm with you in terms of I'm actually surprised as an adult these days just how much the Canadian people will put up with it. Just it baffles the mind. And a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, I'm sure you do, but I'll do this stuff online, but then I have to, whether it's at work, and as you can tell, I get verbal diarrhea. I'll fucking talk to anybody. I don't give a crap. But I do that out in the actual physical world so I can test it. So are people really because early on I just convinced myself, no, it's just all online. People are not this fucking stupid. They're not this docile. There's no way. But then even in the industry I'm in, which is construction, I actually drive truck for a paving company. Yeah, we build the roads, right? But anyways, but even in the construction field, we're typically, when I was growing up, I was in the construction field most of my life. And growing up, I would have never thought, if you had told me as a young man, that all these guys, even during COVID, would just fucking sit down, shut up, and take whatever was told them and just follow, like as if they were, I don't know, just grunts in the military. Whatever they were told, they just did, unquestioning.
Unquestionably.
And it baffled my mind, because it's like, well, if this is a representation of what should be your typical strong-willed, the true Canadian Northman, right? The hard-working construction guy, right? It's like, well, if these folks can even be captured, why? And this is the part that's so utterly disturbing, which is why, to me, the politics, like, there's a lot to be done. But if we could all even just figure out one way to defund the fucking CBC and to stop having to prop up, because really, Canadians, and you know this yourself, you talk to a lot of Canadians, and to them, you would almost swear that God or Jesus himself was talking through the CBC to them, because they take it as if it was the gospel. And it baffles me. And and I'll tell you, I grow up, and as a truck driver, I'll admit, I listened to CBC for a lot of years, and actually some of the radio programs, like Ideas, the odd time you'd get, a decent program, although a lot of times it was just Marxist bullshit, shoving fucking socialist ideas down your throat. But I was always interested in at least hearing some intellectual debate or discussion. But Canadians, and this is something that the people who set it up, they did a real good job, because they convinced Canadians, this is just so that we can inform you. But in reality, it's like, now we have our own devices where they can spy on us at any time. Right. But we didn't even have to carry a cell phone. Back then, it was our televisions that was controlling it. Not necessarily spying, but it was the radio and the television. And we, because they did it so seamlessly, and we didn't have access. Like, this is the other thing. People, even like myself, I'll say, like I just did. Oh, it was much better when I was younger. But was it? Because when I think about it, when I was younger, did I have the internet to be able to check alternative sources? No, I fucking didn't. And actually, I grew up poor, so I didn't even have an encyclopedia. So were they just as manipulative back then as they are now? Probably a pretty good chance.
I'll jump on that one. Sorry, Alan. Yeah, I'll jump to you in a second, Alan. You're absolutely right, Bennett. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot. People go, I want to go back to the 80s and the 90s. I remember the good old days. But that's what brought us here. That was a predecessor to where we are now. And it was those incremental steps in that direction that took us exactly where we are. So why in the world do you want to reverse that 30 years just to do it again for 30 years? I want to find a way to fix what we got, so we actually have a good 30 years in the future. It's going to be a different path than we saw before. We should have different things than media. And Alan, what I'm going to come to you with is we spend $43 per person, man, woman, and child in Canada to supplement the CBC. So $43 from everybody in Canada goes to the CBC to ensure that they continue to do what they're doing. And when Pierre wins, because it looks very clear that he's going to do that, unless Carney can pull something off, will we actually get a change? Will it be the CBC now just working for him? Or will it be alt media? Or are we going to be in a situation where they continue to attack media, like Bill C-11, 18? They were talking about 63. That was pretty scary. And the Conservatives have their own version of that. So are we really going to get into a position where we have media back when we fund it to the tune of $43 per person, man, woman, and child?
No, we're not going to get it back, because they're rotten to the core. But I saw the change. That's what I was going to start to say. That I remember back when, do you remember Barbara Frum? She was the first, sorry about that. She was the first lead when they started the National. There was the News, and then they had, or was it the Journal? I can't recall the name, but they had the News, and then they went to this news magazine format. And Barbara Frum was the first moderator of that. And she had come there from the CBC radio, and she was the lead on As It Happens.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and I wasn't a religious listener, or I would listen occasionally. And the one thing I remember, though, was Barbara was great. They would call people up wherever anything was happening in the world and talk to anybody. So what's your take on what's going on there? Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Okay. And then talk to somebody else. Oh, what's your take on what's going there? And that's all she did, was just get them to speak. And we would hear from people on the ground in sites around the world where things were taking place. But then she got replaced there by, I think it was Mary Lou Finley, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. And I started listening to her, and she was terrible, because she drove the narrative. That's when things started to change. People like her started getting in. Barbara was old school classic journalist.
Right.
And Peter Mansbridge, he was an old school journalist. And then they started. It's something I even saw with the company I used to work for. I spent my career with what used to be Inco, International Nickel.
Oh yeah, I delivered up there.
I started with them in 1980, and during the 80s, it was a great time to be alive, a great time to be as geologist. That's my career.
Mhm.
And during that time, I saw a difference, a change in the attitudes of people in management. Like when I first started, there's rough and gruff and talk and tough and everything else. And like those were the leaders that got in to be the manager and things like that. Bold and brash. And then they would replace themselves. They would hire somebody who would that would not be competition for them.
Mhm.
And so it was a culture of mediocrity infiltrated into the company bureaucracy. And now that I think of it, it's the same kind of thing kind of happened with the CBC. Like the traditional journalists, I'm not sure what was going on. Maybe at that time the new hires were already infected by the socialists who were the professors at journalism school. Like you had to go through university to learn to be a journalist rather than going to working for a newspaper and being a busboy or whatever, and work your way up through. And that's how you learned was through the School of Hard Knocks. And that's in the last 50 years. There's been that change and it's so bad now. It's just like I was saying about the main political parties, and just don't forget, guys, that we're great here in Canada. We have multiple parties. Yeah, why is it only two parties get elected ever since Confederation? 158 years of either liberal or conservative, liberal or conservative, liberal or conservative. And one of my favorite journalists, true journalists, is Mark Stein. And he's got the phrase he comes up with that conservatives get elected and they're in office. Socialists or liberals, they get elected and they're in power. And we see that. We see that going on right now. Like, look at all the stupid laws that the liberals have been trying to push through, like, oh, we're going to fight hate speech by taking away your right to talk. No, freedom of speech. Oh, no. Oh, you'll be free to speak as long as we agree with it. And we'll decide what we're going to call hate. Like, that's the problem with hate speech, is who defines it. Just the fact that I just used the word hate, was that hate speech? And
I'm sure in some circles, Alan, I'm sure in some circles there's people hating on us right now. Absolutely. And what we're going to do, we're going to jump over to our supporters for a second, because I got to get ready for Shadow Davis. I'll be jumping on his show shortly. So if I'll get you gentlemen to hang around for a little bit. Before we go, though, Bennett, I wanted you to kind of jump onto what we were talking about there. Do we really want to go back 20, 30 years, or is there a different path forward?
Well, this is the thing in terms of the politics, right? So unless you get an actual party inside to actually change things from within, then the only thing the only other way it can happen is it has to happen through, natural, the people of the country naturally want that to happen and demanding that it does. I don't see that particularly happening anytime soon. I'm with you. I thought we were going to kind of bring up the 51st state and the Republican thing there too, which is, it's something that I don't even think is actually a real thing. I think it's all about negotiation for Trump, but I love the fact that everyone's getting on board and getting all up in arms. And now all of a sudden these progressives that hated the flag when we were, all waving them there during the convoy, but now they're just wrapping themselves in the red and white, right? Drowning themselves in some kind of nationalism. I'm sure they have a quick bath immediately afterwards, right? Because it must drive them nuts. But Trump,
he's an open book. Art of the Deal. You can say it in one
correct
sentence.
Read his book.
You demand a huge amount, and then but you're a nice person. I'll take a little less.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm willing to negotiate. But the first thing he does, ask a lot. And you, whoa. And then how about half that? Well, sure, why not? Yeah, okay, all right. You happy? I'm happy. Okay, good. Well, there's the art of the deal. So he's just doing what he's always done. Yet we have these idiots who call themselves journalists, and they say, "Oh, geez, he's going to put tariffs on Canada." No, he's not. That's his.
Actually, you know what, Alan? Actually, I just remembered something I was going to talk about that you were mentioning earlier, and I just wanted to do it before Jason ties it up there for now, is when you were bringing up the left versus right thing, too. This is another thing, and you were saying like the liberals win and then the conservatives. But every country, and if you think about this, even if you go to Europe where there might be 10 or a dozen different parties, yep, they're all split along that same line. And I personally, I think it has a lot to do with because human psychology and the way our brains work. Well, there's the feminine type of brain, the male type of brain. Like there's different areas of our brain that's more like analytical, the other's more creative. So I think what it is the psychologists of the world, the sophists, the Machiavellian mind types, is they just realize actually that works perfect no matter where you go. You can call them Democrats and Republicans. You can call them conservatives and liberals. You can call them Labor and Tory. Call them whatever the hell you want. But at the end of the day, they're going to vote along whatever these key little talking points each one puts out. And each one has an appeal to certain people and certain demographics. And that's usually how it lines. And of course, there's crossover. Doesn't mean it's always going to be the same. Not all men are going to vote conservative and all women are going to vote liberal. But depending on how you tweak those policies, that's basically what it is at the end of the day. And to me, what I want Canadians to do is stop falling for the bullshit, folks. Like, can we just come on? We're all adults now, right? We fought off. We learned that the Easter Bunny was not real. We gave up Santa Claus. Come on. I mean, come on. Let's just stop allowing these idiots to manipulate us. Put all of our, like I say, we got, first of all, have you noticed? I'm not even thinking of even focusing on one thing. I could find disagreement amongst us, no problem. And it would stir up some controversy and maybe get some clicks. Don't give a shit. All I care about at the end of the day is that we all just, like I say, forget it. Jason wants to live his life. He wants to be peaceful. I'm sure you do as well, Alan. As with most Canadians, we just want to go through life. Just leave me the fuck alone, will you? You know what I mean? Kind of deal for the most part. And of course, we want to help people out that need help and all that stuff. So can we just take all the bullshit, like in terms of divisive stuff, and let's just, like I say, since we are, although the problem with us in Canada is we are the media now, that's the truth. But unlike the US, that actually has genuine freedom of speech, and even with all the attempts to try to stifle them, they have ways to get around it, and they seem to be able to do it amazingly. Here in Canada, our voices, I think our voices are massively suppressed because the voices that are seemingly pretending, right? So just the conservative types, their voices, no matter how much you say, no matter how terrible you stereotype liberals or anyone, you can say whatever you want. Same with the liberals or the NDP, no matter how outrageous they are, but they're functioning in that little Overton window, right? That allowable discourse. Whereas people like us, they know that what we're saying is going to resonate with. So to the people who want to keep this country remain the way it is, the most important thing for them is to stifle the voices of someone like Jason or Al, because they recognize that we're just average Canadians. We don't have an agenda other than just leave me the fuck alone kind of deal. And because we're not captured, we don't have any of the baggage that these people. We are a genuine and serious threat, and we have to start thinking along those lines. That's why they put so much effort into silence and suppressing our voices, is because we are the genuine threat. So if we're going to be the media, then we have to find a way to get to a larger audience, which I think the most important thing here now is doing these kind of interviews, because there's going to be some of my audience that has never watched the Jason Lavigne show. I'm sure some of them have, for sure, but then there's going to be some of Jason's show who might have never heard of the Canadian Libertarian. But what all this does, and I'm going to try talking with all different kinds of people from all over this country for the next little while. to see if we can, and I entice you folks to do the same. And anyone that's watching this video, if you have a channel or anything, if you have any kind of a platform to get your voice out there, let's not just sit and function in echo chambers, folks. Let's reach out to each other, see what the hell we can do. Because I'm just one guy, Jason's one guy, Alan's one guy, but if we put all of our minds together, I'm sure there's enough brain power there that we can figure our way out of this shit. It's just that we have to get out of our echo chambers. That's the thing.
No, fair enough. Alan, just hold on. But Alan, just hold on. We do have to jump over to the other side. We'll get to your cover or your point there in a moment.
I just got a quick.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But I do have to get over there because we got to get ready for the next show. But I did want to say what you said there, Ben, is absolutely correct. We got to get out there, and that's why I'm sitting in a restaurant in the bar, surrounded by strangers right now, showing the show, and also filling the audience in the dining room because they're watching the screen right now. And this is what we have to do. We have to get out there and talk to people, meet people, and share. Thank you very much for restreaming on both of your platforms. So you just did what you preached right there. We are now reaching bigger audiences. So thank you very much for both of that. Alan, hang on, because we do want to share some of this with our supporters. So we'll get to that in a second. Public, please share this out. And remember, we'll be in Stony Plains tomorrow at the Fresh Grill Kitchen. And we're going to have John Carpe from the JCCF. We're going to be talking about the proroguing of the Parliament and the lawsuit the JCCF has filed in order to stop that. It's illegal, according to the JCCF. So John Carpe tomorrow, and we'll be in Stony Plain live, so you can come join us there as well. And share this out there because we had a great conversation. There's a whole bunch of different ways Canada could be run. Libertarianism, we're in a monarchy now. We can have populism, and we need to do something. But what really matters is, I think, this turnout idea. Let's have record turnout. Let's not have 16% like we saw in BC. Let's have 90%. And let's do it without force, because in Australia, they have the right idea. It's rights and responsibilities, and that's the responsibility portion of it. You're responsible to vote, participate in your government, hold them accountable, and really stand up when they don't. Canada, we haven't been doing that. And maybe it's our anthem. Maybe it's the way we were brought up. Maybe it was our Sesame Street. And we thought maybe we should just stand on guard for thee, but maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we need to take a step forward, not just hold the line, advance the line, especially when your tyrannical government is hurting your people. They're literally killing you. And that's counter to the purpose of a government, to keep you safe and secure, when they are the problem and they're the ones that are threatening you, whether you're a journalist, a politician, or just somebody who's standing up for what you believe in. We are in interesting times. I think unprecedented is going to be the word of 2025. And please stay tuned. Carney has something in store for us. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I do have to bring you back. I would love to get into the 51st state conversation. So later this month, I do have Randy Hillard coming on, and we'll get into that. So maybe I'll bring you both back or something like that.
Yeah, So this is going to be done for tonight, though, right? Because, I thought you were going to put me on hold.
Not tonight.
No, okay, good. Yeah, because I'm a little bit older guy getting to my bedtime.
No, fair enough. I got to get to Shadow. Shadow's waiting for me. So thank you very much, public. Make sure you take care of yourself and your family. And gentlemen, hold on. There's a couple questions for you. But public, take care of yourself and your family. Make sure you shake the hand of a neighbor or a stranger. And why do I keep reminding you about this? Is because I love you all very much, and God bless.
All right, folks. That's a wrap on the public portion of today's show. Thank you for watching. If you found this valuable, please share it with friends and family. Want to connect with the Lavigne Show community? Become a free member today and join the vibrant space dedicated to champion justice, accountability, and open dialogue. Engage with myself and fellow advocates, and stay in the loop on our latest broadcasts. Want to do even more? Become a supporter for just $7 USD, $10 Canadian monthly. If you can afford more, you're welcome to increase your support, helping us stay truly independent. Supporters unlock full, uncensored live streams, interactive Q&As, behind-the-scene content, and so much more. Ready to join? Head over to thelavineshow.com to become a member or supporter. If you have any questions or need help, email members@thelavineshow.com or call or text 587-673-9955. Supporters, we'll see you shortly. Thank you, and God bless.